Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We will wait a few more minutes to allow more attendees to join the session. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We will wait a few more minutes to allow more attendees to join the session. Thanks. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure for us to be here with you at what is our first event in English as the Riesgos Catastróficos Globales team. Our first research topic is food security in Argentina, and why not the entire world, during an abrupt sunlight reduction scenario known as ASRS. Let's remember that we are also streaming on YouTube. Before introducing our speaker, we want to reiterate that Riesgos Catastróficos Globales is an organization whose purpose is to ensure that GCRs are considered, taken into account, and correctly prioritized and managed in Spanish-speaking countries. At this time, our team consists of a network of experts and a multidisciplinary team. We are carrying out other research that we hope you will enjoy as much as we have enjoyed this one. Now, we are pleased to introduce Daniela Tiznado. Daniela is a food industry engineer from Mexico who graduated from Tecnológico de Monterrey. Her expertise lies in research and product development, which she has successfully applied to various projects related to emerging food technologies. She is passionate about creating a safer and more sustainable food system. Driven by her industry knowledge and experience, Daniela is committed to exploring innovative methodologies that have the potential to revolutionize the food system, such as preventative measures for catastrophic scenarios. The dynamic is that Daniela will present, and during her presentation, you can ask questions through the chat that we have enabled. After her presentation, we will open a Q&A session for those who want to ask questions openly. Go ahead, Daniela, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. As Roberto mentioned earlier, I'll be presenting a brief summary of the research we did on food security in Argentina in the event of an abrupt sunlight reduction scenario. Next, please. Briefly, I'll mention the presentation structure to know what to expect. So first, I'm gonna introduce the risk. Then I'll present the methodology we use to determine the region to work on and how we prioritize it. Number three, I'll mention the effects of an abrupt sunlight reduction scenario, mentioning what would happen through the year of the catastrophe, followed by the initiatives elaborated with the help of the ALFED team. And then I'll mention the conclusions of what we learned through our research. And finally, we'll end up with a Q&A session. So global catastrophic risk refers to certain risks that can affect the well-being of humanity on a global scale. Within these risks, there are events that can significantly affect the global food system, among them an abrupt sunlight reduction scenario, also abbreviated ASRS. An ASRS is an event in which the atmosphere will be clouded by a large amount of soot by not letting in sunlight, causing a global winter. We identified at least 3 causes that could lead to an ASRS, which are the impact of a large asteroid with a probability of occurrence of 0.001% per year, an eruption of a supervolcano with a probability of occurrence of 0.01% per year, and a nuclear winter with the probability of 1% per year. The consequences of an ASRS could lead to a catastrophic global food shock due to a loss of world agricultural production. That is why preparing a response plan in countries capable of self-sufficiency in an ASRS can be an opportunity to mitigate the lack of food in the world during this type of catastrophe. In this research, we identified the most promising Spanish-speaking regions in an ASRS, considering the fact that the Southern Hemisphere will be less affected by such an event. That is why we decided to focus our efforts on Argentina. Next, please. For the prioritization of regions, we took into consideration some models as an initial estimate and also evaluated different factors in each country, such as supply chain resilience, because in an ASRS, it will be vital to continue with the distribution of food and goods, political stability and government effectiveness, as coordination and trust in governance at the institutional and local levels is very important, and production capacity since the better food self-sufficiency of a country without any adaptation, better opportunity for its population to survive. Considering those factors, we decided to focus on Argentina, since it would have greater productive capacity during an ASRS. During our research, we conducted a series of interviews with national and international experts and actors related to food security in Argentina. For the experts, the factors we considered were experience, relevance to the topic, recognition, and of course, diversity in their geographic locations and backgrounds. On the other hand, local experts were contacted to determine the possibilities of implementing various food solutions in Argentina that were considered promising. As for the interest groups, the approach to local actors was carried out based on the understanding of the National System for Comprehensive Risk Management, also called SINAGIR in Spanish, whose function is to integrate the actions of the different levels of government in national emergencies. Interacting the information collected from the interviews with experts and the interest group, we were able to specify initiatives for Argentina in the case of an ASRS. Next. In the event of an ASRS, the effects will vary depending on the magnitude of the event, measured in the concentration of soot ejected into the atmosphere. In a scenario of 150 teragrams, Argentina would face serious effects on the environment, water supply, and a significant loss in agricultural yields of up to 73%, which starting 2 years after the catastrophe occurred and without taking any kind of measures, could lead to a death by famine of more than 1 million Argentine citizens. You can briefly notice the decrease in global caloric production on the graph if there were no measures. That is why the country's first ASRS risk management plan was written. Next, please. In response to the threat in an abrupt sunlight reduction scenario event, ASRS, represents for food security in Argentina and the world, different initiatives and strategies are proposed that seek to guarantee access to food. These initiatives have been grouped in 2 categories. In the first place are the solutions in terms of food supply and communication, and in the second group are the solutions associated with resilience in food production. In this category, there are recommendations and initiatives focused on the formulation of strategic plans as a preventative measure in various areas. The first initiative is creating plans and strategies for water supply, because having a drinking water supply plan is crucial to ensure access to clean and safe water for drinking, cooking, and maintaining sanitation, thus avoiding possible emerging problems related to public health. The second initiative is creating rationing food plans alongside the reduction of food waste to its maximum. This is crucial to ensure that food is available for as long as possible, as supplies are limited, of course, in this type of catastrophe. The third initiative is to maintain commercial openness and give guarantees to producers. From a commercial point of view, Argentina's main partners are Brazil, China, United States, and Chile. Therefore, food exportation represents the largest source of income, which demonstrates the importance of maintaining commercial openness for the production and sale of surpluses in Argentina during an ASRS. And the final initiative in this section is having a clear and centralized strategy in terms of communication to avoid panic in the population by disseminating the emergency plan of an ASRS. In this category are initiatives associated with producing resilient food, along with various alternatives. So the first initiative is the redirection of food used in animal production and production of biofuels. This initiative seeks to maximize the availability of food during an ASRS. Instead of feeding animals with products that could be destined for human consumption, these should be redirected to feed humans directly, right? In addition to redirecting food, stopping new births of breeding animals is a preventative measure to conserve limited food resources. The second initiative consists in adapting agricultural systems to increase food production, meaning relocating crops, increasing the cultivation area of low temperature tolerant crops, and increasing the coverage of low-tech greenhouses. We wanted to highlight that it will be necessary to relocate cold-tolerant crops such as potato, wheat, and maize varieties from high latitudes to lower latitudes in order to maintain yields in areas currently planted with crops that require higher temperatures and are not suitable under these conditions. The relocation of crops must start immediately after an ASRS to prevent the worst consequences of the catastrophe that can occur approximately to 2 to 3 years. The third initiative is to have aquaculture adaptations to increase food production, meaning to strengthen the national algae production industry. The last initiative consists in implementing high-tech adaptations, such as redirecting the paper industry for the generation of sugars from plant biomass, obtaining single-cell proteins from methane and other natural gases, and the production of plant-based proteins. To evaluate the effectiveness of the proposed solutions, estimates were made with various scenarios for a high magnitude catastrophe, that is 150 teragrams. 6 scenarios were proposed. 2 of them showed the current production of Argentina without any type of adaptation, and 4 of them were modeled with their respective adaptations. In the scenario 2D, involves implementing resilient food production strategies, such as building and deploying greenhouses, and a significant increase in cultivated land by planting half of the area utilized from pasture to agriculture. In the model, you can see the y-axis shows the calories consumed per day, and the x-axis demonstrates how food production progresses over the month during the catastrophe. In this graph, we wanted to show the number of people fed according to the most relevant scenarios, so we could compare them. The scenario 1A indicates the net food production without any type of adaptation, followed by scenario 2A, already in an ASRS event and only having rationing food system as a strategy. This demonstrates a decrease in the number of people fed, but it increases again in scenario 2B, that it includes the redirection of used feed for livestock and biofuels to human consumption. In scenario 2C and 2D, resilient foods are already taken into consideration, but in scenario 2D, the number of people fed increases due to the expansion of the cultivation area and the construction of greenhouses. That is why food solutions such as crop relocation, algae production, and industrial resilient food can significantly increase food availability. For the implementation of the initiative, the main institutions in charge and how to respond to an ASRS were identified. Some of them are, for example, the Secretaría de Agricultura, Ganadería y Pesca, the Dirección de Emergencias Agropecuarias, that it is divided into 2 institutions that are called Omega and Ora in Spanish. And for example, we identified which institutions should be prepared and have the strategy plan, and which institutions should be the ones implementing it as a response after the catastrophe. You can find more details in our paper if you would like to know more and more details about this specific section. We concluded various points And the first one is that an ASRS could cause the death of 6,000 million people worldwide, which is approximately 75% of the current population. The second conclusion is that Argentina would have a crucial role in the production and distribution of food in an ASRS, which is why we put our efforts into researching and writing about it so that more people could access this type of information. The third conclusion is that Argentina must implement strategies in terms of food supply, communication, and production, followed by our fourth conclusion, which is that the preparation and execution of contingency plans should be a shared task between government, the private sector, and the civil society. This also highlights the importance of the creation of an interdepartmental group so that the preparedness increases. The final conclusion is that a collaborative and multilateral approach is essential to secure international trade during an ASRS. This is by emphasizing the economic advantage Argentina could have in such an event. Now we have arrived to our Q&A session, so please feel free to write in the chat any questions you might have, and Roberto will read it out loud. Also remind you to follow us on our social media so you can be updated with all of our work.
Thank you very much, Daniela, for this excellent presentation. Now we open the Q&A session, and the mics are open for you, and also the video if you want to stream your video also. We haven't received any question in the chat, so well, if you can raise your hand and then feel free to ask.
I'm happy to ask a question, not sure how to raise my hand, to be honest.
Sure, Vasco, go ahead. Well,
okay, thank you very much.
And then after that, we will go with Bogdash.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, Vasco Grillo from Alliance to Feed the Earth in Disasters here, ALFET. Thank you very much for doing that report. I'm just curious whether you have any thoughts on the prioritization amongst different measures to build resilience, given that, for example, in your graph, outdoor growing seems to basically be the measure that will either make like sufficient food or basically if there's no outdoor growing, then even if the other measures are implemented, it looks like it will be difficult to produce lots of food. So yeah, I'm just curious whether you have any thoughts on that. Well, maybe like lots of resources should be put into having cold tolerant crops as opposed to having like a super wide portfolio of measures like industrial foods, seaweed, greenhouses, culling animals. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Vasco, for your question. I think that maybe Juan, would you like to answer it? And also is all the Vías Catastróficos Globales team, so just everyone is free to ask also to answer.
Yeah, I can respond. I would say that outdoor growing is a bit of a general, like a bit of a, how would I say this? Not terribly useful description for like the type of things that you would need here, like whether outdoor growing would allow you to either produce like barely enough for the population versus way more than you need. It's more about like the interventions that you need to apply to agriculture, right? And we go through in the report, we go through how implementing them sequentially could like increase significantly the amount of agricultural material you can produce. As you may have seen, you know, like redirecting a lot of those outdoor grown vegetables will allow you to produce much more food for people instead of using them for biofuels or animals, and then increasing that production through, say, the better selection of strains, you know, cultural land crops, and the deployment of greenhouses and the expansion of area and so on is what will allow you to produce a lot more. It's all outdoor but it still requires significant effort and interventions to work. Now, to get closer to the core of your question, which I think was on how important that all of those outdoor growing interventions put together are in comparison with the rest. I would say that definitely for the Argentinian region, that's like the number one thing you need to do. Outdoor growing or conventional agriculture, if you want to call it that, is what would make or break the situation. Definitely, most of the production in almost any scenario that you can picture would come from that, based on current technologies and current situation. Still, I think it makes sense to have a selection of additional food sources, especially considering that perhaps depending on how the scenario plays out, some of them may produce food at lower costs than some agricultural production. But definitely the agricultural interventions are by far the most important ones for the Argentinian region, which may not be actually the case for some other regions in these abrupt sunlight reduction scenarios.
Makes sense. Thanks, Juan.
Thank you very much, Juan. So before going with Felix's question, I will give the floor to Wojtek.
Hello, my name is Wojtek Brenik. I'm from Czech EA Association. And actually, I have very similar question to Felix. Like, I want to say thank you very much for your work. It looks very interesting. And what are like your next steps? Do you either take it to some policymakers, or what do you plan with that? Also, second question is, did you contact some academics during your work? I mean, I noticed in the report you have few interviews, but mostly are all fed. So how successful you were when you try to talk like academia people or this kind of research?
Thank you very much, Wojtek. Well, Juan, if you don't mind, I can answer the question, and then I will give you the mic for the second one. For the first one, yes, of course, we made very good work with the stakeholders. So we made a research of almost like 120 offices that are related to risk in Argentina or to the risk system. And then we concluded that 8 offices were to prioritize in this case during an ASRS. And then we contacted them. We conducted some interviews with them. And now we are preparing to also make a presentation for them in order to make some steps that we can follow after the conclusion that we have made. So yeah, this is something that is very important for us, and also is aligned with the main topic that, the main outcome that we are proposing with this kind of research. And then also we would like to conduct some workshops with them, in order to that these kind of recommendations can be included into the RIG system that they have, that it is called the SINA here. So that's also something that we are looking for. And then one for the second one.
Yeah, of course. Since you were the one to interview most of the academics too, I think it makes sense for you to chime in. But I will say that we did interview a certain amount of experts from academia outside of OFED. You can see some of them there. I will also say that this being such a niche field of inquiry, a lot of the conclusions that we received from experts were not perhaps directly relevant to this scenario. We did learn some very relevant things, for example, relating to the seaweed industry in Argentina and its history. But most of the relevant literature and modeling and academic conclusions came from OFED due to this being such a limited field of inquiry.
And
yes,
also
actually,
please,
yes,
Daniela.
Just to complement a little bit about the answer of Juan, is that we interviewed experts specifically on the recommendations or on the initiatives we wanted to make in this type of report. So, for example, we interviewed an expert in Argentina that his work is mainly in algae or other type of experts. So yeah, I just want to ask like that little thing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, for your question. And I think that Elliot, Felix, I don't know if would you like to complement your question, because I think it's related to the previous one, or maybe to add something, or do you think that it was answered? It's okay. Okay.
I think
great.
I can maybe complement, like talk a bit more about the answer to Elliot in
Sure.
terms of whether the research should reach a higher grade before taking us this step. We from OPSIN, OFED started, OFED, which is the one creating the research on which a lot of the report is based, started in 2016 or so, and Dave Denkenberger has been doing research on this since 2014. I would say roughly around last year or so, we made the call to start disseminating our research. After so many years of research, we decided that we were reaching conclusions at the level of certainty that it was worth starting to raise these issues with policymakers and starting to make recommendations that they can use to build upon to create their own contingency preparedness and response plans. So I would say that the research is at this moment at a higher enough grade of maturity that we can take these steps.
Also to complement, it's important to highlight that we take into consideration like the civil offices or the civil entities, but we also had the opportunity to interview the Secretaría de Coordinación Militar en Emergencias, that is like kind of office inside the Ministry of Defense that it has the responsibility to deploy all the military personnel around the country in order to attend this kind of situation. So this is one of the things that for us was very important, that we can we could interview many stakeholders that were important in order to recommend some conclusions or some recommendations that were all together in different aspects, not only for prevention, but also after the catastrophe. I don't know, someone else maybe who have a question. I don't see anyone in the chat, or someone would like to complement something. Okay. If no one else has any more questions, we can conclude the presentation, but not without first expressing our enormous gratitude for your presence here today. We would also like to thank Daniela for her excellent presentation, and the Riesgos Catastróficos Globales team for their contributions. Before we go, we would like to invite you to follow us on our social media platforms. You can find us on YouTube as Riesgos Catastróficos Globales. Oh, sorry, Baptiste. Yes, you have one more question.
It looks like Vasco also had a question before Wojtek.
Vasco, oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, not necessarily like related to your report in itself, but I wonder whether you have any thoughts of maybe like connecting with other countries in South America, maybe other countries which were higher up in your prioritization list, and maybe together with ALFED and together with the expertise that you develop, or with Riesgos Catastróficos Globales, basically try to replicate this report for other countries.
It's a possibility for the future. It will partially depend on the next few months, depending on the resources that we have available to dedicate to these and other topics, and the conclusions that we reach once we have come up with a report for each of our 3 priority areas in terms of risks. which is the risks of the risk of global catastrophic food shock, the risk of artificial intelligence, and the risk of biosecurity, pandemics, and and also like designer pandemics. Once we have come up with reports for all those three and prioritize between the three, then we might decide that we want to focus more on this and do similar work, or we might decide that we want to focus on doing more work on the risks.
Okay.
Thank you, Juan. Also, Wojtek, do you have a question?
Yes, I have quite simple, like, when do you plan to put English version of your report on the web?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we are working on that right now. We have a preliminary English version, but it is not 100% polished. So we hope that in the future, we would have like a 100% English version.
We have, like, as Daniela just said, we have a preliminary report, and you can find it in Effective Altruism. So I will send to you the link in order that you can have access to it.
Yeah, thank you.
We will have an official translation at some point, but we haven't finished it up yet. And we have other priorities on the other risks that we're talking about. But eventually, we are aiming to have it ready. We're working on it.
Yeah, I'm asking because there will be some grant opening in I don't know, 1 month, where there's one of the opportunities for asking for writing similar report, not exactly more about global warming than the dimming of the atmosphere. So I'm asking this preliminary translation, I'm allowed to share it or not with some academics or?
Let's talk privately about this later.
Okay,
I think that'll be better.
Okay.
Contact me on Slack or email, or however you prefer.
Okay, great. So someone else maybe who has a question or a comment? Vasco, do you? Or
was just going to say nice work.
okay, well, thank you very much. Okay, so I believe that then we can conclude the presentation. So before we go, we would like to invite you to follow us on our social media platforms. On YouTube, you can find us as Riesgos Catastróficos Globales, on LinkedIn as well. And on Twitter, we are as Riesgos Globales, sorry, at Riesgos Globales. And we just send the links on the chat. And we hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thanks.